Morning, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well, and thank you for sticking with us on the fourth day of the meeting and back-to-back Zooms. So I'm happy to see almost 300 people here. So we are going to update you on some things going on in the Research Admin Committee. I'm Lynette Arias, the co-chair, the only chair right now of the Research Admin Committee. We will be looking this summer for a federal co-chair, and I'll walk you through what we're going to talk about today. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just do a brief overview for anybody who might be new, so you know what the Research Admin Committee is all about. And then you've heard from some of the Research Administration Committee subcommittees, of course, sub-awards session on Tuesday and the contract session. We have three areas that we want to give you updates on. For about the last year or so, we've been exploring the area of proposal development and submission from the business requirement side, partnering a little bit with the ERA committee, looking to see if there's some initiatives we can do there to reduce burden, again, on the business process side. So Amanda's going to give everybody an update on that. And then Courtney will be giving everyone an update on the clearinghouse and where things are there. There's been a lot of activity to get new members in the clearinghouse. And then Rick has quite a bit of information about what's been happening in the Open Government Research Administration Data Subcommittee. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's going to happen this summer and the rest of the year for research admin. Next slide. And I'll let Rick and Amanda and Courtney introduce themselves a little bit more during their sections. So again, just to orient everybody about the work of the Research Admin Committee, Subcommittee, and Working Group. So we're really the pre-award part of the life cycle. And so I've been maintaining this slide for a while to kind of show you what's going on within the Research Admin Committee. So we have some broader areas, open government, and then also the faculty administrator collaboration team is sort of administratively homed in Research Admin Committee. And then again, the proposal, the new area we're exploring. I've got in the area of awards, I've still listed terms and conditions on here in case that should come out of abeyance and have more activity. And then of course, contracts and expanded clearinghouse and subawards. So we're the committee that handles anything or thinks through anything that would happen in the pre-award life cycle. Next slide, please. And I think you're familiar with a lot of these people. We've had pretty good consistency in our committee for a while, but these are all the people engaged in our committee. I'll talk a little bit at the end of the session about filling out some of our subcommittees and bringing in some new people into the Research Admin Committee. So I'll say a little bit more about that at the end of the session. Next slide. So with that, I will turn it over to Amanda Haymaker to talk about the proposal exploratory initiative we've been working on. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. As Lynette mentioned, I'm Amanda Haymaker. I'm the director of pre-award at Purdue University, and our office is entirely focused on proposal development, or really proposal preparation and submission with the faculty. Stephanie Gray at University of Florida, Lisa Mosley at Yale, and Lori Schultz at University of Arizona are also helping to co-lead this exploratory initiative. Next slide. So this is a little bit of a repeat from the fall, but also a little bit of new information. We wanted to bring everybody up to speed on what we're doing with this initiative. The goal really is to engage in trying to reduce burden related to the proposal submission, just-in-time process. So we're looking at different processes and requirements to try to focus in on what might be the best thing to possibly do a demonstration on, or to engage more with other groups within FDP. We're really collaborating a lot with the ERA committee in some of these discussions. That's why Lori is part of this group. We've also got potential to collaborate with so many other FDP committees and working groups, faculty, federal partners. There just seems to be a lot of crossover in the things that we're talking about and the things that other groups are talking about. Currently, as I mentioned, we're really working to identify what might result in the most significant reduction of burden from the federal proposal side of things when it comes to that development submission just-in-time stage. We're looking to determine priorities related to those things. And as I mentioned before, this is just exploratory in nature, and we're looking into things to see where maybe we could make some impact. Next slide, please. So these are some of the initial activities and discussions that we've had as a group so far. In September, we engaged with the Science CV session and with NSF. We also were involved in some discussions related to research.gov, just giving them some feedback regarding that transition, specifically related to the demo site, both Fastlane's demo site and the future possibility of using a research.gov demo site. And then we've worked most recently in the last, I don't know, 4 to 6 months on completing this initial analysis of business practices and requirements related to proposal submission, specifically surrounding the federal agencies that are part of FDP. So I'll show you what we've done so far. If you could go to the next slide, please. So this table is kind of our initial stab at just getting a visual of all these different things that are required as part of a proposal or just-in-time process, and at which stage they occur within each of the agencies that are part of FDP. It was designed in a way that a yes or a just-in-time response was assumed to be the more flexible or preferred option. And I've just highlighted a few of those on this, this table to kind of point out where there's maybe one agency doing something we really like, and we'd like to, you know, see maybe more of that from other agencies. So those are just some initial thoughts, and I do recognize that, especially when we get into the different DoD agencies, that it's not maybe a broad across the board answer. We try to go with most of the time, this is what they do. Those seem to vary from project and program to program. So we tried to put in what we knew as being most frequently occurring. So this is just a resource we're using as a kind of a guide in our discussions. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is what we've been working on in the last month or so, in developing a thought exchange to really collect more ideas and thoughts. And we want to take the results we get from that thought exchange to compare them to that chart that I just showed you, and try to zone in on what might be the best area to focus on you know, further exploration and possible demonstration project or other sort of working group focus. So the potential to expand our working group once we zone in on this is something we've been talking about. And so once we figure out what area we want to focus in on, we will reach out and try to find some individuals that might be, you know, best situated to help with those discussions. So next slide. Okay, so I mentioned a thought exchange. We're going to try something today. The question that you see on the screen in red is the thought exchange question that we're asking. So what do you believe would result in the most significant reduction of burden in the federal proposal development, proposal submission, and just-in-time stages? The link there, we're going to drop that in the chat for you all. Feel free to go ahead and start adding your thoughts or starring the thoughts that are already in there. But make sure you pay attention to my fellow presenters, because we don't want to take away from their presentations, but we thought we might give a try and see what kind of data we could gather just during this session. We will also continue the thought exchange after the session for those who weren't involved in today's meeting. Next slide, please. And this is a repeat slide from the past. I just kept it in here for those who are maybe new to this, new to FDP or new to this conversation. These are the kinds of things we've been thinking about and talking about. There's just a kind of a running list of ideas. So we'll leave it in here so you can reference it in the future. Next slide, please. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Courtney to talk about what we've been doing with Expanded Clearinghouse.
Thank you. So good morning, I'm Courtney Swaney. I'm the Associate Director of our Pre-Award and the Office of Sponsored Projects at UT Austin, and I'm going to talk to you about Expanded Clearinghouse this morning. Next slide, please. So this is our committee. You might notice there's been a change. So as of March 1st, we have new co-chairs, Amanda Haymaker, who we just heard from, Denise Moody, and myself became the co-chairs. But don't worry, Lynette Arias and Pamela Webb are still actively engaged with us as senior advisors. And we've already called on them quite a bit. And Lynette and Pamela, we'd really like to thank you for all you've done for us and the guidance and the vision, and we hope that we can continue to carry it out. Next slide. So in addition to some extra updates, in addition to the new co-chairs, we have fully published all of our phase 7 profiles. So that was 37 of them. And kind of a first order of business, we decided to go through our website and our system pages and look for things that might need to be updated. So we've updated quite a bit of language, not any major changes, but oh, I'm getting a notification. I thought I turned it off. So one thing that we did notice that we were getting a lot of confusion on is that our non-members or anybody that was paying to participate in the expanded clearinghouse sometimes thought that they were paying a FDP membership fee. And so we've made the clarification, and we're calling that a subscription fee. So you're subscribing to the expanded clearinghouse. So we've clarified a lot of that. And then as we went through all of this on our subcommittee website page and our clearinghouse page, we noticed our profile participation agreement needed some tweaking as well. Throughout, we were calling ourselves the steering committee, and that has changed with the new phase. And so we wanted to update that language, and then we kind of switched around. There were no other major changes, and an email went out to all of our participants. Next slide, please. So this just kind of tells you a little bit about, as we've gone along, the cohorts that we've allowed in. And as you can tell, in July, we are looking to add another 23 non-FDP member profiles. Next slide. So this gives you a little bit of a timeline of how that's gone. So we invited, oh, hold on. My slides went down. So we invited 48 institutions, and 23 of those accepted. So we are, working to get them through, and here in the next week or so, we're looking to send out invitations for a second wave of non-FDP members. And so in between that, by July, we hope to have all 23 of those that we're working on right now to be fully published. Next slide. So just some things that we are continuing to work on. So we are actively engaged in the FDP infrastructure working group. Our own Chris Renner is co-chairing that working group. And so we have great representation on that. I'm also on that working group along with some others. And so we're waiting and holding up on any other major system enhancements because we're working with this, the working group. And so we want to make sure that everything falls in line with that. We are also working with the Civil Works Committee on the risk assessment questionnaire. So that is upcoming, and we're really, really excited about that. So I hope in the, by September, we can start to add more information about that. And then our own Pamela Webb is continuing to be our point of contact with our European colleagues on the due diligence group. We haven't heard from them lately. I know that they are very busy working. And so hopefully we'll hear from them soon. Next slide. Now I'd like to turn it over to Rick.
Great, thank you, Courtney. And it looks like I got remote control already. Howdy, folks. My name is Rick Fanger, and I am representing the Open Government Group today and representing these folks here. Just wanted to give you a brief update. We did update the web ahead of this meeting, so it's a little snazzier than previously and a little more informative. A couple of highlights were we've not repurposed, but kind of reordered some of our thoughts around how we're approaching FDP as a whole and what our goal is within FDP. The structure of the work groups and how to participate is a little more apparent this time around. And I wanted to call out the idea that we're trying to stand up a gathering place for folks that are interested in data in relation to their administrative work, and encourage folks to bring their thoughts to this group and begin a little bit of a community of practice where we can share things like dashboards or any snazzy tools that folks have that make their world go round. And then addition a section for special notes around any open government activities. And our current one is our partnership with the finance group and the NSF and Treasury effort to develop a prototype and eventually launch an approach to the letter of credit drawdown process. So that's all out there at the refreshed website. And then I wanted to catch up on some of the things that are going on with where we've generally tethered our goals and objectives, which have been the president's management agendas and the related CAP goals. And those have held up for a number of years after the Data Act. But things have changed once again with the new administration. So I wanted to highlight some of that stuff. We've been focused on CAP Goal 8 for the longest time, and it really still holds up, but some of this presentation material is going away. And for now, while we're in the interim, performance.gov looks like it's changed a bit. You can get to the archives from the previous president's management agenda. And when it comes to data, it's really about the idea that there's a dedication by the federal government to make data more available, more transparent, more defined, more standardized, and that seems to be holding up, and we expect the same to come out with the new president's management agenda. But for now, one of the things that remains from the previous era is really this CUSMO concept, and we have one for grants, and it's just getting off the ground. It was just staffed in January, and they have an executive director now, so things are starting to get rolling. And here's a little description as to what it is. So that's kind of where we're targeting now. It's out of OMB, and it ties together some of the other partnerships that we have with the federal government when we're talking data. So for us, with everything kind of changing on that front, or as we wait for updates, we're still continuing many conversations and monitoring several things that have been ongoing for years, and list them here, but I'm not necessarily going to read them to you. But within our current work, we're currently finishing this up, and that's what I'll talk a little bit about here coming up, is the drawdowns and a summary of some of our findings, even though we haven't completely published our white paper version yet. There's other modernization efforts. The DLT is just one of them, and I'll put that in context a little bit. The CUSMO we've already hit on, and then a new partnership with another group within FDP to see if we can bring evidence to the table on FSRS and where that process works and doesn't work by surveying and looking at the data and really isolating evidence. And then there's more to go around the herd report and some of the system matrix analysis that's possible with the system matrix that has been set up for a couple of years now. So when it comes to the survey, big picture wise, we received feedback from 62 folks, and really we asked questions around 5 drawdown systems. One of them has gone away since we started this effort. So we're down to 4, but still relevant information regardless. And then really getting into, how do these data points shape up as far as being interesting from an analysis standpoint? And then is there anything we can affect? And then we're hopeful to get this done mid-June. We've just had some complications with timing and people's schedules and that sort of stuff. So summarizing, on the left-hand side, I decided to keep the table of contents in here. This is kind of as proof that there is a table of contents. No, not so much. It's more of a way of just finding our way home so that all of these things weren't out of context. But for the number of respondents, it seems that there is over the majority draw multiple times a month. So that means out of the 5 systems, folks are hitting the systems quite a few times a month. But at 50%, folks are doing it less than a month or greater than a month. So it's really a 50-50 proposition. I think it's going to be based on the size of the institution and just how many grants you have and how many sponsors you have that use the different systems. So there's probably a correlation to size and volume in there. When we look at the systems that are in use, the highest volume go through PMS and ACMS, and that kind of plays out in the familiarity piece here too. You can see that the top two are ACMS and PMS, and then others within there. Looking at the experiences, it's interesting that ACMS is the easiest to use and ASAP is the least. And then that plays out as far as difficulty to see your data or understanding your data. So ACMS seems to be best of breed there. When it comes to the availability, it seems that systems are available enough. When you dig a little bit deeper into this, you find out that it's not so much about system availability. There's actually requirements around systems as to whether or not they're up and available, and that's based on sponsor and that sort of thing. So there's another layer to dig into in this space as well. So we'll probably do that somewhere down the line. And then support seems to be fairly consistent, but when it comes to ACMS, you can see that there's nobody that's dissatisfied. But when it comes to PMS, the other big dogs, when you're trying to assess maybe best of breed out of the two that seem to be bubbling to the top, you start wondering why there's a little bit of a discrepancy in terms of satisfaction and why PMS really looks more like ASAP than it does ACMS when it comes to satisfaction and support. Looking at the number of staff that it takes to be a part of the process, when you're looking at preparation, you're looking at generally within the 1 and 2. When you're looking at submission, you're still in the mostly 1, but 1 to 2 category again. But it looks like it takes more people to prepare, and then it takes just one person to submit. And then when you get into the reconciliation piece, you can see that now all of a sudden there's mostly 2 and more involved in the reconciliation. So it seems the data that comes back requires extra effort for whatever reasons. Not entirely sure, but we'll probably dig into that somewhere down the line. And then just the number of hours spent is clearly spent in the post-draw actions. So whatever's going on there, it's probably perfectly legitimate just in the way we do our work, but it could be that there's a data quality issue there that we could surface and talk about what's good and what's bad about the data that comes back to the institutions. When it comes to the process, this is the amount of FTE that is related to each system. And for this one, this circle here in this light blue says really not much effort is put in whatsoever in terms of FTE. So when I look at ACMS, I see that there's nearly half of the users are spending less or the least amount of time on the system. Now, when we relate that to PMS, if we're trying to, lost pointer here. There we go. When we look at PMS, we're down to 20% of that, and we see more folks spending more time working on the PMS system. So again, to that best of breed, what am I seeing here that makes ACMS so light in terms of effort? When it comes to the process, when we look at the review, we see everything within the it doesn't take much category, extending out to 1 to 5 days for most everybody, but generally seems to be in the nothing to 1 day kind of space. So pretty immediate across the board. Although some others like this one seem to be, extending, but that one's going away. So what does it matter in the long run? When it comes to the confirmations, ACMS, they send a lot of emails apparently, whereas PMS seems to be more internal to the system. And since I don't know the business at all, I foolishly thought that having things internal to the system was a good thing. But in talking to folks and just getting this information out in front of folks, has got the discussion going that ACMS really handles this much better in terms of what a lot of people's opinions are. So it's not so much about everything being internal to the system. It's actually harder to access some of the information you need within PMS because they're search tools and that sort of thing. versus what CMS produces. So interesting discussion there, which totally reversed my understanding of the process. And then the average time to receive funds generally seems to be on par for everybody, except for GPRS, which of course, again, is going away. So opportunities around additional tools, and this is interesting in the sense that a lot of people are using additional tools. So something about these systems don't quite get us there. So exploring this deeper to figure out what folks are doing to augment how they're doing the process is interesting. So you can see pretty much across the board, everybody's doing something. And we know that's bulk upload spreadsheets and that sort of thing, but to really figure out some of the whys, especially in relation to the DLT efforts with Treasury and NSF, would be good to know. Talking about the actual manual keying versus uploading data. So just the process of a bulk upload. It feels like a lot of folks are doing manual entry. And I think that's, again, going to be tied to volume and size and that sort of thing. And then when it comes to supporting documentation, it feels like not a lot of folks are looking for much, but then there's a varying degree after that when you are. So nothing really to report there of interest. When we get to the what could we do better section, and our survey also has an entire section dedicated to recommendations and kind of a final conclusion, but some of what informs that is really talking about, top of the list would be the ability to upload data or even connect via an API. Some of the worst features we highlight, and then process improvements. And I'm not going to read them to you, but some of them might jump out as interesting to you, so it could promote further conversation down the line. And then with the survey, just a moment for acknowledgement across all the folks that have participated in our various phases, from creating the survey to analyzing the survey, and then now we're handing the survey off. But like I said, there will be analysis and recommendations and conclusions in the final product that go beyond just this summary. But what it looks like now is that we're going to take the survey and deliver it to this DLT group. And in context, this is what MITRE has lined out as the grant life cycle for all the modernization activities. And with those modernization activities, we're looking at just this one with the proof of concept. At FDP, through Open Government, you have seen a proposal around this risk evaluation. There's another one behind the scenes that's getting cooked up around cross-agency reviews. And then across this bigger picture, there's all sorts of other activities going on. But for us, we'll deliver the letter of credit to this group over on the finance side. And then they can run with it in context of the grant life cycle as envisioned by MITRE, and what it might look like in a blockchain kind of way, hence the blocks, but really getting to the area that we're focused on, which is that payment and the relation to the agency and the university. And then that also breaks out into something like this, where you kind of have the gear, and that one comment should have been taken off, but oh well. They used this for the DLT meeting as well. But really just the process that goes on amongst the Fed to us and back and forth with the payments. So the group has been getting started, and they're looking at this piece, which then gets blown out into this piece. And as the group has been getting started, it's a pretty big picture when you think about modernization of things that we're pretty used to and have been around for years. So understanding the big picture has been one part of the exercise, and then really trying to hone in on a specific part of the process that we can all agree to is where we're at now. And that's really focusing on number 2 here, which is, out of our large group of participants in the DLT prototype group, can we really agree what's going on with the drawdown request process? And then when we understand that as a team, really extend that to number 3, which is the receipt of the money. And potentially when we get good would be number 4, because a lot of folks want to talk subs at this point. So that's where we're starting up with the new group. Of course, there's going to be infinite more details, and this is all mapping out the current process. Nate, as he presented it for the finance group yesterday, went into the future state activities and some of the maps there, but I'm not going to bore you with all those details because it's a little out of context for us. So, bit of a reminder, webpage has been refreshed, and here's how you can contact us if you're interested in talking to us. And we'll leave it at that and hand it back to Lynette.
Thanks, Rick. I was wondering, could we actually go back a slide? Let's stick with Rick's stuff. Rick, I was wondering if you could, you might have said this and I missed it, but could you remind everybody why, since we're the pre-award committee, why you started in looking at that particular stage of the life cycle and what started that and what it's teaching us of how we can look at our processes going forward. Because I think we've been considering this a little bit of a starter prototype of how we can assess the data.
Sure, you're right. I blew past that context a little bit.
Just remind everybody. Yeah.
When it comes to the data conversation, we really see the grant life cycle as one. So for us, it's a little less important to define pre versus post. But in the case of getting started with open government's attempt to really provide evidence to some of these areas that are, quote, burdensome, we were working with partners in OMB, and they said, we need help measuring burden, and everybody talks about burden and everybody says it, but we really can't find any details. And oftentimes it's, burden is a mile wide, but only an inch deep in our understanding. So can you help us, start drilling beyond that 1 inch and get us some real details, and maybe help us even define an equation around burden that would allow us to understand it, and then allow us to understand whether or not we're affecting it in any way. So we picked letter of credit because it was apparent to most folks that it's the most simple, it's the most apparent to everybody, it's the easiest slam dunk for a part of the process for us to focus on, because everybody has to do it and you don't get paid if you don't. So we decided to focus on that, and once we lifted up the hood, we found out that it's not as simple as everybody thinks. So it ended up being a good place to start. But given simplicity for the process itself, it gives us something we can actually get through and package up and report back to somebody. And that was kind of our starter exercise. But like I said, once we looked under the hood, there was enough information there, which I think has been a little bit of the reason why this is dragged out as an effort, is just because it is a little bit interesting beyond what folks originally thought. So does that answer it, Lynette?
Yes, and let's see if anybody else has any questions about it. But on the pre-award side of things, have you started to think, or can you imagine what other areas we might go into potentially next using the same sort of approach?
Yeah.
Put you on the spot here.
Yeah, and that's where not having the rest of the team here, I'm not going to put us on the spot, because there's about 4 things that have been highly debated at this point. So I think if Stephanie were able to join us today, I would ask her to chime in, but for the moment, we'll just kind of keep that with, finish up this bit of effort and then project maybe for next time.
You've got one of your teammates there, Avi. Hi, Avi. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to things, Avi.
Nate's there too, and Nate owns most of this stuff, so.
Or Nate, anything you want to add? Or does anybody have questions? I know that was a lot of information. Rick does really good at kind of keeping his finger on the pulse of a lot of these areas and how they might fit together and how we can drill into our data. But and if people need, Lily or was this, if you're there, can you unmute Avi?
Yeah, Lynette, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks, Rick, for presenting all that. I'm Avi Tempelkar, work for National Science Foundation. So going back to Lynette's question as to what next we want to take on. See, open government is a challenging environment just because we are going through, COVID and administration changes and all that. But one of the key things that we are trying to engage with government-wide initiatives and taking lead from there, and the priorities, like Rick went over the President's Management Agenda and CAP Goal 8, and how it's forming uh, like changes in the priorities of the government, and how we can align and assess that. So some of the areas that are coming up is the grants QSMO, and that essentially is a quality service management organization, which HHS is running now. And it it kind of opens up a big platform in setting up marketplace for agency, um, as well as private partnership with FDP and institutions and input from there. So the LOC survey that we are doing, it directly feeds into, it will feed into some of the QSMO inputs, and they can align, or they can even take on initiatives based on that. There are other areas, including pre-awards that would come up, and in collaboration with that, we would take up some of those activities also. And in general, with American Rescue Plan Act, and then OMB memos and OMB priorities, those are also getting worked on through Treasury and through Data Act as the means for agency submission. It's also opening up a lot more, oversight perspective on, not just the awardee process, but also the subawardees and subawarding process. So there are a lot of areas where we could do improvements, and we just have to say where we can pick the priorities and make a difference. So, and we are looking for a lot more volunteers to make this happen. I hope that answers. I don't want to go into much more details and take up time.
No, that was great. Thanks, Avi. So there doesn't seem to be any questions, and we have, we sort of went through all that content pretty quickly. So I'm going to take the liberty of backtracking just a little bit. It seemed like people were really interested in the chart, Amanda, that you had. I don't know if you want to say a couple more words about that. Moises, can we back up to that towards the beginning? There was that cute, colorful chart. Can we go back a few slides? Keep going, back. And then Amanda, if you wanted to say any more words, or if anybody wants to unmute and ask any questions, then I want to show you just a little bit. There you go. So people were interested in how you put this together, Amanda. Can you talk about kind of what's in it so far, and anything else that you might be thinking to do?
Yeah.
And then I'll talk about ThoughtExchange and how you want to kind of compare what everybody's thinking to this.
Sure. So we started off kind of with just our own list of the things that, were in our heads. And when I say I'm talking about primarily Stephanie Gray, Lisa Mosley, and myself, just in a brainstorming session, and trying to wrap our brains about what are we looking at, and which agencies are involved, and where do we need to focus. And so we kind of made that list on the side, an initial list. This has been revised over time, and then put all the agencies in there and started to fill it out. So I took this chart to my group of managers in pre-award at Purdue, and I know Stephanie and Lisa also floated it around at their institutions to get feedback and help, and quite frankly, because I wasn't as familiar with some of the agencies as others on how we should fill in some of these boxes. And if anybody is looking at this too as well and says, you know, for ARO, we really do a lot of, you know, I don't know, current pendings is just-in-time responses. I'm just making one up. But if you think it should be different, let us know or let me know. Because some of these are based off what we could remember and what we think our experiences have been over time with these agencies, especially in more recent years. But the idea was really to see, you know, where is there something that that maybe one or multiple agencies are doing in a way that we really prefer, and how can we, you know, work toward maybe moving, you know, the other agencies in that direction, or think about business processes that might make things, you know, just easier, more flexible. This is all exploratory, so there's not a lot of hard thought about how we're going to do that yet, or if it's even possible. But you know, listening to the presentations over the last couple of days, especially with NSF and current and pending, I would so love to see them move to a just-in-time process for that personally, and I'm sure a lot of you can agree that would be so beneficial from a burden reduction standpoint. And the use of Science CV, we're seeing more and more of that, you know, hopefully with NIH moving in that direction. And I was just talking with my managers this morning a little bit about some of the things I heard yesterday. And the formatting of NSF's BioSketch seems to be moving very close to what NIH, or not BioSketch, current and pending other support document, they're moving to be very close. But, you know, on one hand, that's good. On the other hand, it's more, right, on the current and pending for NSF. So we talked a lot about that, and just, you know, hoping that people will start using Science CV to try to keep it more contained. I know at Purdue, our experience right now is that we have clerical level staff running current and pending reports, but the reality is the formatting and the content requirements and the questions the faculty are asking has moved beyond the abilities of our clerical staff like it used to be. And so, you know, at Purdue, we're trying to get funding to staff these up at a much higher level. And that's just part of what's driving kind of thinking about this, and where do we focus in, and where's the, where do we reduce burden so we can, you know, stretch our staff in different ways and move them to different focuses that might be necessary. And so part of the thought exchange is to help draw some of that out to see where we can really focus in on trying to advocate for some sort of change that would help us in that regard. I think we have a raised hand from Kuziak. Could you unmute him?
Sorry, you made me laugh. Good to see you. I think in the context of foreign influence, and we talk about current and pending support and disclosure of information, I think having alignment around the timing of that could be really powerful. I think that's really important to think about, just a standard practice that so it doesn't cause confusion. So I would frame it within that and talk about it that way. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to put out there the use of modular budgets.
Yes.
What about them? Well, why don't we see the expansion of them? I don't want to put Jane Feldman on the spot. I don't know if she's here, but I seem to remember a FDP meeting of yore where she had mentioned that NSF was going to pursue that, or at least pilot it. So it would be nice to, when you think about the burden of putting together a budget, mm-hmm. and really just shifting the focus more towards compliance of the costing principles, right? Maybe we could have a conversation about expanding the use of modular budgets in this context. Yeah. So,
yeah, and that is on
my comments.
That is on the chart. We didn't call it modular; we called it abbreviated budgets and justification. Oh. And so, if you can, that's one of the highlighted yeses at the top there, or the first one. So. It's definitely something we've talked about. And I know my experience at Purdue anyway, when they did pilot that only briefly and it felt like in a very small number of programs, I felt like it didn't get communicated very well on the program side, because we would submit it and then they'd say, well, where's your budget? And we have to go back and submit a budget anyway. So
Yeah.
perhaps we can, you know, try again. Stephanie Scott has her hand raised. Could you unmute her?
And while she's doing that, let me just say there's a question in here about, do you have Department of Justice on the spreadsheet?
So we only included, so DOJ, they're not a FDP member, are they? No, so that's why we did not include them. We only included the FDP member agencies. You know, I'd love to include them from a reps and cert standpoint for sure, and some other things. Department of Energy as well. They're actually doing some things well, I think, and using the same formats as NSF and Science CD. Maybe not as well as we'd like, but still they're using them, and that's great, but they're not FDP members. So this is primarily focused on the agencies that we can connect with and work with at this time. Stephanie?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So great first attempt, right? At kind of laying it all out in a chart. I think I just had a couple of comments, which is, and in combination, I guess, with the thought exchange that you're gonna eventually present or look through, you know, identifying what the low hanging fruit is with all of these things to then prioritize what we want to work on, I guess, as a group. I guess I would caution, you know, with some of these things, you know, what we're calling ideal and preferred, because, you know, amongst all our institutions, obviously we have different setups, different processes, different systems available to us. So what might be less burdensome for one institution might be more burdensome for another. Right. So for example, with the modular budgets, like in theory, it may seem like that is less burden, but I think most institutions, I don't know, I could be wrong, or at least at our institution, whether you have a modular budget or not, usually the central office needs a detailed budget anyway to check to ensure that the modules are appropriate, or we need to have some type of detailed budget in-house. Maybe some institutions don't do that. I don't know. And so, like, my understanding with modular, certainly I think it was less burden for the federal, you know, for NIH, maybe the PIs, but there's still some burden there, I think, for the administrators. So I guess I would just caution that we're not all built alike. So maybe you want to do a survey with some of these things that you list as flexible or preferred to see, like, if, you know, all basically, I think you get my point. All of us are not all created equal. Right. In terms of what we may want, but
right. Well, you're exactly right, and I mean, there's a lot of comments on this that are coming in as well, and some institutions don't do it, and it reduces the burden and for them, and then in other cases they do. And I was just thinking as I was reading, I'm thinking, well, yeah, at Purdue we do a detailed budget and at proposal stage to save time when the award comes in and to be ready and have everything set up, but then I started thinking, but why do we really need to? So there can be some internal conversations to think about that. And I bet Lori wants to talk about it more. She has her hand raised. So if we could unmute her.
Thanks, Amanda. I just think that, you know, since the Thought Exchange actually asked this question, this is a really great opportunity for all of us to examine the burden that we impose locally and why are we doing it. We at the University of Arizona, and Courtney mentioned in the chat that we find departments are putting one together anyway, which is fair, they do, but we don't require one. And you know, I think there are ways at getting at the information you want, particularly F&A exclusions, without there being a full detailed budget. And I think part of it is why are we asking? And if we're asking so that we have the budget when we load the budget when the award comes in, why are we as institutions not doing just in time? So that's just my soapbox.
And there's just a lot of good points about this coming through in the chat. So definitely good point raised, Stephanie, and good counterpoints as well from others. So lots of things to think about. And I think anything that we identify to move forward with, these are the kinds of discussions we'll have, you know, before taking any sort of action to really push in one way or another. But also, you know, it's a good opportunity if we do push in a way that there are things that we can provide suggestions to FDP, you know, institutions about how to maybe change internal processes as well. That would be something that we would do.
And Amanda, just to add one thing in relation to Colette said several in-person meetings ago, she asked Michelle Bowles about this, and that Michelle said they were discussing. There was a time, so back when Lisa Nichols was still at OSTP and ran the Administrative Burden Reduction Committee under JCOR, I had some conversations with her about what that group was talking about related to reducing burden in the pre-award area. And she had shared with me that they were talking a little bit about modular budgets and just in time, but there were some reasons why the group, cross-agency as a whole, wasn't keen on pursuing that. But what Lisa and I talked about is if FDP can bring more information and more data to them, I got the feeling like it was something that we could potentially get back on the table. So, you know, one of the things the Research Admin Committee is going to be looking for is what happens when the OSP director hopefully gets confirmed and they get going again, and what's going to happen with those JCOR subcommittees, and if we can reconnect with whatever iteration of the, you know, the research business models or the reducing admin burden committee is, I'm sure they're going to get together in some form again. So I'm trying to keep those connections going so we can have those conversations. Do you want to, Amanda, take any of these questions, or I can show everybody the ThoughtExchange just a little bit?
I think we can do that. A lot of it looks like a lot of the comments are really focused around the modular budget discussion. Yeah. So it'll be good to have these comments to refer to after the meeting.
Yeah, and so since we have time, I'm gonna, hopefully I can grab the screen and just show you the ThoughtExchange. So can you all see that? And so let's see. So this is pretty cool. You know, we've been experimenting with this ThoughtExchange at FDP. It's a tool to just collect from people anonymous thoughts, feedback, and it has all kinds of power behind the scenes to theme things and categorize them and whatnot. And so we're currently using it for free. And that might run out, but just to show you, I mean, just as you guys, so we started this, I think, Amanda, we might have had like 15 participants. And when I just clicked a button to get these slides and you guys had entered, I think we were up to 80 participants. Okay. So I can show you this. This is, you know, this is the question. Yeah, so 84 participants when I like 10 minutes ago pulled these slides. And so we had 57 thoughts and already 881 ratings. So hopefully some of you went through this and are starting to get the feel for how ThoughtExchange works. Jim Luther's been using it for the foreign influence panels as well. So we asked some questions just to frame the data a little bit. And so this is kind of how it breaks down of who the people are that entered. Size and type of institution. The predominance of their funding. We really like the word harmonization. So this is just a, you know, a word cloud to pull out key things that are in the thoughts. And so here you can see it just quickly pulls the top rated ones. Again, we love harmonization because that's, again, I mean, I think we say that over and over and over. And the feds tell us, be careful what we wish for there. And so I understand that, but having to know all the different forms and processes So it's interesting here that was the 3 top ones. You can kind of see how they get themed. This is an kind of a AI automatic way to theme it. We can also go in and do some work on the themes ourselves behind the scenes. So going into those categories, then it just, it pulled those top 5 themes and is giving us the top rated thoughts within that theme. We're back to harmonization. So there we're looking at just in time. So I think this is showing us a lot of what we already knew, but again, we can also go in and see in detail, all the different thoughts. So this can help us gather from you, and it's anonymous, so we don't know who you are, what institution. All we know is how you frame it based on the size of your institution and whatnot. So if you can switch back to the slides. What is this? Can you take the screen back? There we go. So that's just give you an idea of what we're collecting. Again, we'll send out an email to everybody that registered and participated in this session with the link to the Thought Exchange, and we'll continue to collect more information. And then the beauty of these Thought Exchanges is you can sort of cull it down to maybe some top areas and then ask more questions about it and collect more information. So we'll continue to do that. Lori, did you want to say anything about that question in the chat or examples? You want to do it offline? Offline. Okay. Let's see here. So did anybody, just before I do wrap up, since we have time here. Oh, we have a chat comment from Alice. Alice, do you want to unmute and talk about your comment? Can we unmute Alice Young, who is our faculty liaison for Research Admin Committee?
Hi, Lynette. I'm here on a computer that doesn't have a camera.
No worries. Hi, Alice.
But I was just, as a faculty member, commenting that when I run out of money on a grant, it's usually recently because the institution has increased local costs, like animal care costs, per diems, laboratories, things like that. And my institution certainly doesn't give me any money to cover those costs. What I've got to do is decrease scope of work. So at least in my area, the reason that I find doing budgeting at proposal time useful is because it gives me a sense of, okay, what am I going to need in order to get keep this project going? And again, recently, the biggest issues haven't been so much external costs as they've been internally imposed costs.
Yeah. I mean, one thing we'd really like to do too, obviously, is partner with the faculty and get you all providing information into the Thought Exchange. So Alice, maybe that's something you can help us with. And as we flesh out this working group and kind of expand things more, it's prime territory for a strong partnership with faculty.
Happy to do it. And there are a lot of people who are, I suspect, on the call who are going to be interested in this.
Yeah, I've said this before. It's just kind of funny that we, within the Research Admin Committee, the pre-award committee, I think in the past we focused on systems, proposal submission systems in the ERA committee, but within Research Admin, we haven't had activity specifically focused on the proposal. submission business requirements side of things. So it's a whole new, in a way, area that we can drill into. So I think Amanda and Stephanie and Lisa and Lori for starting to delve into this. So
Thank you. I need to jump to something to get ready for the session this afternoon on foreign influence. So we'll see you there.
No worries. Thanks, Alice.
Bye-bye.
We'll keep the questions coming. We'll save the chat too. And if there's anything in there we can answer offline, we will. Let's go ahead and wrap up. I still see we're not losing too many people. We still have 300 people. So let me just wrap us up here by saying, so I don't know if you can see my cute kittens are laying on me now. Going into summer, so, you know, you've heard from Jason Carter and Mike Kuziak. Mike, are you still on the phone? You're still on the session, that we did the volunteer interest survey. And so we've got a lot of information about people that are interested, potentially interested in the Research Admin Committee and the various subcommittees and working groups. So we're just starting the process of culling through that information. And I'm really excited that we've collected in a way now that we won't lose it or misplace the sheet that we handed around the room for people to put their names on and whatnot. So we've got that rich data. I want to really reach out to everybody that's expressed an interest in the Research Admin Committee and see who, hey, Mike, you are there. So if you want to jump in and say anything about this too, or correct me on anything I'm saying about the volunteer interest survey, please do. But so, okay, thanks, Mike.
Well, she unmuted me anyhow, so.
No. So chime in anytime. We
Okay.
always like you chiming in. But for the Research Admin Committee, we're going to have some particular focus in addition to, you know, for administrators, seeing who all wants to get involved in what, is really enhancing our partnership with the faculty. We'd like to, when I was starting to look through some of the data from the volunteer interest survey, I was happy to see there were actually 4 or 5 faculty that expressed interest in the committee. But we're going to go out to the faculty committee as a whole and talk to them, but also federal agency partners and liaisons. So historically, so way back when Marsha Hahn from NIH was the federal co-chair, and then I think maybe Debbie Raffi, and then Wade Wargo, but again, he stepped down. So we're going to look at the potential of bringing in a few people from different agencies so we can have them as part of our group to talk through on any of the subjects we work into more detail on. So that's going to be happening over the summer. And then really looking at our priorities and staying in sync with what's happening at the federal level. So Rick talked a lot about this, where, you know, reestablishing relationships with federal agencies people that may have changed in the new administration. So still in, you know, pretty close contact with the OMB grants team. One of their interns that worked with the OMB grants team last year, Chad Clifford, is now the executive director of the grants QSMO. So we have some conversations going on with him. We're of course anxiously awaiting what's going to happen with OSTP. I'm waiting for eventually later this year or next year, we'll get a Biden president's management agenda. So trying to stay in sync as well, coming up with things on our own that we want to work on, but staying in sync with things at the federal level. So we'll be kind of collating all of that to talk more about our priorities across our committee. So we're always open to any other ideas in this space. And in September, I'm hoping that we can bring some more information, potentially like Chad and his team from the QSMO, or maybe people from the grants OMB team, and also MITRE. I think we might still have 1 or 2 MITRE people on the phone here. And so we've really enjoyed our partnership that's been developing with them. And I'd be interested in having them share in more detail with you the things that they're working on. So that's kind of some of the things that you can look forward to for the fall in the September meeting. So with that, any final questions, or is there anything in the chat that anybody wants to speak to and raise their hand for? If not, I will thank you all, and thank you, Amanda and Courtney and Rick.
Looks like we have a hand raised.
Hi, they unmuted me. I'm Alice. I'm an FDP newbie. So
Hi, Alice.
hi, this is fascinating. We appreciate all the hard work, the very organized. You guys bring it the way we bring it to research administration. Angie Rashad had an amazing comment about the collaborative submission process we see in the NSF environment. Boy, does that reduce burden when people can, from their own institutions, manage and submit. Is there any discussion about that? And also someone mentioned NSFs, if they did it just in time, it would reduce burden, and I'd love to hear how. Does that mean because the current and pending would go away? Thank you.
Thanks, Alice. Amanda, you want to take that? It seems like there was a little bit of starter discussion about collaborative proposals.
Yeah, so so some of the discussion over collaborative proposals and how it would reduce burden, I guess, is, if we're doing those, then we're not dealing with subrecipient budgets and subrecipient forms and the the monitoring that comes with that. So some of that burden is reduced at proposal time, but also then at award. And we've talked a little bit about it. NSF's process is nice. Their system functionality is preferred. I recently had an experience with the DOE collaborative, and that is not my preferred way of doing it. But again, DOE not part of FDP, so so that that's one thing we have talked a little bit about. And then the second thing you asked was about just in time and NSF. And I guess from my perspective, when thinking about reducing burden with using just in time would be things like, you don't submit your current and pending at proposal, you submit it, we take out all of that piece. So that's, all those documents we're not having to check and gather and all of those things. Yeah, and that's the primary one. But even if we're talking about like a modular budget concept, regardless of whether or not your internal process requires a detail, then you don't have to have quite as detailed justification that also needs reviewed at submission time, those sorts of things that could reduce some burden at the proposal submission step. But now coming back and doing it just in time, obviously, for the most part, people's award rates with those sponsors are what, 20-30% maybe, if you're good. So reducing all of that work on all of those proposals that aren't ultimately going to get funded based on the science would be ideal. And when we think about DoD agencies and the massive reps and certs documents that we're filling out for something that's never going to get awarded, that at least in my seat at my university, is a huge burden that would be removed. So it doesn't necessarily help the faculty directly, but it helps me have more time to help the faculty if I'm not filling out those reps and certs. So those are kind of the things we're talking about. I do want to point out, Jennifer Rodas made a comment related to collaborative proposals with USDA NIFA and the F&A restrictions. So that would help with those wonky calculations we all have to do to make sure we're sticking to their restrictions. So good comment, Jennifer. Yeah, and Courtney says, or have them look at SAM for reps and certs instead of, the 9-page documents. They're different from program to program. And
there's so many things to talk about in this area. One thing we've talked about too, and Amanda and I can talk about more, is just having some sort of open discussion groups and listening sessions in between meetings. So now that we're collecting a lot of information via the ThoughtExchange and this discussion, it might be, I know summer's kind of a hard time to schedule things, but we might try to put a couple of those discussion groups together. So by September, we'll have some rich information to cull from. Any of these other chat comments you want to comment on, Amanda? Otherwise, I'm going to wrap us up.
I think there's a lot of good feedback in there, a lot of good thoughts.
And I'll skip the chat for sure.
Yeah, definitely very good. And I appreciate everybody's engagement.
I do as well. Thank you, everyone.